Well, good Friday afternoon, everyone. Wayne Miller here, the Executive Director of the Venture Center. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon to discuss a very important topic, which is the application of the CARES Act as it relates to hospitality grants. We have a distinguished panel of folks who are going to share some insights here, and I know this is an issue for many of us and what has been, without question, the most heavily impacted part of our economy over this last 8 months. Before we start, I'd like to just always take a moment to thank our sponsors, Wright, Lindsay and Jennings, Frost, Simmons Bank, Little Rock Chamber, and CFO Network. We are so appreciative to all of you for the support that you give to the Venture Center. For those of you who know or don't know, we are a nonprofit, so we survive on these gracious and generous contributions that help make what we do possible. We've got a couple of upcoming programs I just want to mention as well. Coming up on the 11th of November, we have a Venture Center workshop, which is on business succession and estate planning. That'll be provided, that's the 101 course, of course. That'll be provided to us by Wright Lindsay Jennings. Also on the 17th from 3 to 4:30 p.m., we have the Global Entrepreneurship Week Central Arkansas Pitch Event. Just so you all know, there's about $18,000 on the line for some of the winners of our program. We'll be doing this collaboratively with all the entrepreneurial service organizations across the state for the first time. We look forward to seeing you all get involved with that excitement as we do that virtually. And then on the 20th of the month from 11:30 to 1 p.m., we have a Lift the Rock program, which will be about retail forecasting. Let me say again, thanks to everybody. We have nearly 70 folks who have joined us on this call today to learn about this critical issue. And let me begin by introducing some of the panelists to start with. First of all, welcome Secretary Stacy Hurst, who is the Secretary of the Arkansas Department of Parks, Heritage, and Tourism. Thank you, Secretary Hurst, for joining us once again on a Venture Center program. We're grateful for your time and your insights. So thank you for being here. I don't know if Secretary Smith has been able to join us yet. Are you with us yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, we'll keep an eye out for her. And then, of course, we have Gretchen Hall, President and CEO of the Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau. Gretchen, thank you so much for being here with us. We really look forward to hearing about the impact that the virus has had, obviously, on our city, on our state, and how that's how this is going to hopefully be helpful to change it. Jim Andrews. Jim, welcome. Thanks for being with us again. General Counsel for the Arkansas Department of Parks, Heritage, and Tourism. And last and certainly not least, Leslie Fisken, Chief Legislative Affairs of the Department of Parks, Heritage, and Tourism as well. Thank you all for being with us today. This is obviously an important topic, as we can tell from the number of folks who have joined us today. So let me jump right in. First of all, most of this is related to the CARES Act. You know, I had to look up what CARES meant, so I think I'll share that with everybody. It is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. You know, of course, I think I knew that, but I just thought I'd clarify that for everybody a little bit. So we know this is legislation that was passed by Congress to help support our country through this economic downturn. But what I'd like to do is really start with Secretary Hurst, if I could, and ask you to give us a brief update. First of all, a little on your background, if you would, please, so everybody knows who you are and what you do and your role. I'd appreciate that. And then perhaps an update on tourism and hospitality, the industry as a whole in our state, and we'll go from there. How's that sound? I think you're muted.
There we go.
Excellent.
Thank you, Wayne, for allowing us to be here today and talk a little bit about our challenges, but our opportunities as well. And just a bit of background about me. I was appointed by the governor to serve as secretary of the new Department of Parks, Heritage, and Tourism. I've been in that role since July of 2019. Before that, I served as director of the Division of Arkansas Heritage, then the director, the Department of Arkansas Heritage. Prior to that, I had served on the city council in Little Rock for 12 years and been involved in small business, managing a small business. So I'm very excited to be here today to talk a little bit about the CARES Act and what the impact of COVID on the travel and hospitality industry. There's no doubt, I think everybody understands that there have been winners and losers in the COVID economy. And one of the biggest losers generally has been the hospitality industry. The hospitality industry has been really hard hit. In addition to that, there have been some service industry businesses that have been particularly hard hit, like gymnasiums, salons, those sorts of things. Even within the hospitality industry, there have been some winners and losers to some extent. We have seen in our tourism tax, for example, the 2% tax that we collect to market the state, that there are some areas of the state that are doing better in terms of lodging. For example, a cabin in Newton County is doing very well compared to a hotel in Bentonville. So there's that sort of variation within the hospitality industry. Likewise, a fully drive-in restaurant that hasn't had to change their model much during COVID is doing much better than a sit-down restaurant that has been unable to adapt. So we're seeing that variation within the hospitality industry. I wouldn't say that hospitality has recovered. It is doing better in a lot of ways. In other ways, it continues to struggle mightily. And I think that it is fair to say that it will be one of the last sectors of the economy to fully recover. So Gretchen can talk more about that as it relates to the convention business and, for example, the concert business. Those have a long-term recovery. I can say that I'm excited today that we get to talk about the business interruption grant, and I hope people will ask plenty of questions because this is a very, I hope, an opportunity to help some people out in their business endeavors. We don't anticipate that we have enough money to make everybody whole, but I do think it will help greatly. And we were just so pleased that the CARES Committee and the legislature approved this funding for this, what we're calling the Business Interruption Grant, or the BIG. And we can talk more about that, Wayne, as you want to. Leslie and Jim have both been very instrumental in the development of the program. Rules have been developed. Jim can talk extensively about that. He's been the architect of that. And we're just happy to be able to talk about it and share information and answer questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Secretary Hurst, and great segue for Secretary Smith, who's joined us. Thank you so much for being here with us today. You're leading as the chair of this CARES Act Steering Committee, so you have a lot of responsibility, and we're grateful that you're at the helm and in the wheelhouse, as they say. But take a minute and just introduce yourself to our group who's with us today. We've got about 65 folks on to hear about this very important topic, and if you'll share with us, really, I think a little bit again about your background and talk about the CARES Act and how it's fitting into this initiative and this narrative that we started here today.
Certainly. Thank you so much. I'm Elizabeth Smith, and I am the Secretary for the Department of Inspector General, one of the new departments that was created and under transformation by Governor Hutchinson. I also serve as the Medicaid Inspector General, and that's where I was prior to this. And the Medicaid Inspector General's office does fall within my department. But this new role, many of us have taken on additional roles related to COVID. COVID has changed a lot of our lives. As you all know, the CARES Act allowed funding to come to various entities for lots of different purposes. But one thing that was very good was each state was allocated a certain portion. Arkansas and many other states that are the smaller states received $1.25 billion for the states to administer. There were certain parameters for that funding. Namely, that the funds had to be expended for expenses from the beginning of March until December the 30th of this year. Also, the funds have to be spent for COVID-related expenses. So anything that's not related to COVID, we can't spend the money on. And then finally, the other requirement was that we could not have had these expenses previously budgeted. Previously set aside in our state budget or departmental budgets, previously decided how that we were going to spend these dollars. Obviously, if they had to do with COVID, no one had known that this was going to happen.
Hard to budget.
we've worked very hard, and I appreciate Secretary Hurst. She has worked extremely hard working on a number of different programs for Arkansans to be able to benefit, or really, it's sad to think that we're benefit, but to replace losses that they have had related to COVID, to put people, to get people back to work. We had the grant that we spoke about with Secretary Preston. And this grant for business interruption is extremely important for the hospitality industry that has been hit so hard.
Thank you so much. Gretchen, I'm going to come to you next. And of course, Gretchen leads the Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau. Thanks for being with us today also. But would love to get your feel on how has the state, how has the city been affected? Again, a little bit about your background up front would be awesome. And how do you see this grant being helpful? And what are maybe some advice that you can give others as it relates to that, and how to maximize the value of what opportunity this is bringing?
Sure. So thanks for having us. Thanks for putting together this program. We're trying very hard to disseminate information about this program to all of those that are eligible. We want to make sure that all of our partners are able to take advantage of this very needed program. So as it's already been mentioned, tourism and hospitality industry, arguably the hardest hit industry by this pandemic, especially as it relates to revenue losses and the expected recovery timeline. It's going to be a long road to toe for many of our partners in the industry. For LRCBB specifically, we not only recruit meetings and conventions and leisure visitors to the capital city, but we also manage a variety of public infrastructure. And so we manage the State House Convention Center, Robinson Center, the First Security Amphitheater, and then a variety of parking operations and Ottenheimer Mall and Ottenheimer Hall in the River Market. So we've actually experienced the greatest impact within our facilities. In addition, we are funded by a lodging and a restaurant tax, both which have been negatively impacted as well. Within our facilities, we are almost at 290 event and convention cancellations thus far. Unfortunately, those cancellations continue to mount each week as we continue to see additional spikes and prolonged time periods within this pandemic. So our end in this recovery is still going to be quite a ways out. As Secretary Hurst mentioned, some destinations have fared okay during, and even some have thrived during the summer months, especially. Some of those, especially in the remote areas, or those that are around some of our outdoor amenities, being beaches and lakes, and some of those, again, outdoor type destinations are in the smaller areas. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for Little Rock or several of our other partners across the state of Arkansas. Little Rock typically sees a majority of our visitation from business travelers and convention and meetings, groups, festivals, events, and that kind of thing. And those have all pretty much been at a standstill since the beginning of this pandemic. So, but we are very excited, supportive, and very appreciative of all the work and the effort that went into this particular program. It is going to help so many within our industry. With our independent businesses within the industry. Some of them desperately needed support. This is going to be almost a lifeline for them to help them recover some of their expenditures and things that they had to spend. In Little Rock, our hotel industry is operating this year so far at a 47% year-to-date reduction in revenues. So that just gives you a little bit of indication on how they're being affected thus far. So they have certainly seen more larger reductions in their revenue than a lot of our restaurant partners, although there is still a subset of our restaurant industry that is still struggling, as Secretary Hurst mentioned, especially those finer dining, more sit-down restaurants that have a hard time adapting to that takeout and delivery model. So we're excited about this program. We're continuing to try to push the word out, and we want everyone that is eligible to be able to take advantage of it.
Thanks, Gretchen. What's the economic impact on the Visitors Bureau as it relates to the cancellation to date? What does that mean to the city?
Sure. So we are anticipating at the end of the year to have a negative impact of about $7 million. That's just to LRCBB. Over $2.5 million of that is going to be attributed to those event cancellations and revenue, and the remainder of that is our tax revenue losses.
And it's fair to suggest at this stage of the game that you've said this as nicely as you can, that there really is no particular projected light at the end of the tunnel at this point, too, which is really kind of, and so are people just unprepared at this point to want to move forward with booking conventions, et cetera? Or I know at the Venture Center, even our little things, we continue to push out, and we have gone entirely virtual. And, our organization has $1 million impact on the city just per on visitation per accelerator. So we have about a $2 million impact. And of course, we've had no visitors this year, and we don't see any coming in the near future. But how are you contending with that?
Yeah, so I think that's a mixed bag. Just for the remainder of this year, our hotels are very nervous going into these winter months. I think on the group business side, from a convention standpoint, the travel sentiment research just shows that people just aren't comfortable yet moving back into a large gathering environment. The society's not ready. And most of the travel sentiment says that they won't be comfortable until there's a vaccine, until there's known, medicines that really help with this virus, until we really see numbers decreasing across the board. And unfortunately, the timeline on that is unknown. From a concert perspective and even Broadway production perspective, it doesn't pencil financially for those groups to come back until all of the distancing guidelines are lifted. And right now, it's just not safe to do that. And so, the road to our recovery right now is anticipated to be multiple years on the hotel side. And we think that is going to be the case on the convention side as well.
Good deal. Thank you. Jim, I'm going to ask you to step on deck here next, if you would, please, and tell us a little bit about yourself, obviously, and the role that you play as general counsel. And according to Secretary Smith and also Secretary Hurst, it sounds like you've played a big role in helping to get the economic structure of this properly prepared for the market and getting this money into folks' hands. So thanks again for being with us. Let me turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Wayne. Again, I'm Jim Andrews. I live in El Dorado, but work in Little Rock for Secretary Hurst at the Department of Parks, Heritage, and Tourism. Been there almost 2 years now. Prior to that, I was General Counsel, Vice President of Deltic Timber in El Dorado. So I've started a new career just a couple of years ago. It's still very much been a learning curve for me, transitioning from private sector to public service, but the transition has been good. Got lots of good help at the office there. In regard to the program, the Business Interruption Grant Program, it has been a work in progress all along. We're starting from basically zero and ramping up to a program within just the span of a couple of months' time to take advantage of $48 million of CARES Act funding that was allocated to us by the steering committee. It is intended to benefit the hospitality industry, as well as certain businesses and in the personal care industry, as well as tourism and travel. So we're still working on our online application portal. We hope to go live with that a week from Monday. We're currently putting it through its paces and doing what I'd call some beta testing on the online portal. We are far along in that process. We anticipate rolling out on schedule. Right now, I can report that in our development process, we are ahead of schedule. And as far as we can tell, under budget in developing this portal and this program. So that's, I guess, a little bit of light that I can shed on the program at this time. The portal is being specifically designed to be as user-friendly as possible. We're hoping that applicants from our target industries will have very little, if no trouble, navigating through the portal and following the questions that we necessarily have to ask to be in compliance with the program rules as well as the rules of the CARES Act.
Thank you. First of all, congrats on being ahead of budget and schedule. That's good news to hear in this environment for sure. So kudos to you guys for being at that position, and we hope that goes well. We understand technology can be challenging at times, right? We've all become masters of Zoom. Are there some specific funds that are also designated for minority industries or businesses? Can you speak to that at all?
Yes, per our program rules and per state government policy, we are targeting to have 15% participation by women and minority-owned businesses in this program, both in terms of the number of applicants that come to the portal, as well as the grant funds that get distributed.
Good deal. Thank you, Jim. Leslie, I'm going to ask you to step up next, if you would be. And Leslie, if you'll introduce yourself a little bit. You are the Chief Legislative Affairs of the Arkansas Department of Parks, Heritage, and Tourism. And then I've got some questions I'd love to ask. So.
Oh, sure. Okay. Thank you, Wayne. Yes, I'm Leslie Fisken. I actually have been here working for Secretary Hurst for about 6 or 7 weeks now. And prior to that, I've been at UAMS doing legislative work for 2 years. And before that, I worked for Governor Hutchinson doing education policy and working with Department of Heritage with Stacy Hurst. So I did that for 3 years. So coming here, although there's some new faces, I worked very closely with Secretary Hurst for several years. We also did a lot of work together within the city of Little Rock in different capacities. So I think that served me well. When I started here, although I've been here a short time, we really hit the ground running and had already worked together and on several projects. So I think that was very beneficial for us to come together and work with, Jim Andrews and Caleb Osborne to hit the ground running on this grant and do everything we can to get it up off the ground for all these businesses.
Terrific. Thanks for that. And I guess it's, I guess you were able to slip right in, right, in the last 6 or 7 weeks with having previous experience. Well, that's great and good for you. It enables you to get up to speed quickly at a time where it's critical. Can you talk a little bit about some of the eligibility criteria? Is that something that you know something about? And also, when will applications open? Or I guess perhaps any of you can answer that question, but directing it at you initially, Leslie.
Sure. Well, the eligibility criteria. So, well, first, let's see, maybe I'll answer your second question first is when did you say, so our phone banks for the application goes live November 16th and that's at 8 o'clock in the morning and it's online through, ArkansasReady.com. So 8 o'clock on Monday, November, I'm looking at my calendar, 16th, and it closes on Wednesday, November 25th at 11:59 p.m. And
Awesome.
during that period, oops, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say, we'll make sure to communicate that to our audience as well. We'll get that up on social and so forth.
Okay, good.
Becky's already got all
so we have on Monday, actually, we were just talking about, we're going to get the phone number out as soon as possible, but we have a phone bank, kind of a customer service line that's going to go live this Monday, the 9th. So if any businesses have any questions about anything and they want to talk to somebody in person, we're going to have that phone number and we should have that available like in a matter of hours. We also, for support for businesses, we also have the email address, which I think everybody may be familiar with, and you can access that through going to the ArkansasReady.com website as well. And we have fielded a lot of questions and comments over the past 2 weeks that have been very helpful to Secretary Hurst and Jim Andrews and I, and working with these consultants and developing, our rules are developed, but there's flexibility and interpretation in those rules. And some things have come to our attention that quite honestly, we hadn't thought of. So it's been really beneficial for us Although we've received an inordinate amount of comments and questions, it's been really helpful to us for us to update the frequently asked questions, which in fact we updated yesterday afternoon on the website.
Thanks so much.
Wayne, can I jump in and just
Please,
add
please,
a little bit of clarification on who is eligible for this grant? Because I think that people need to understand that before they spend a lot of time searching for it and that sort of thing. So this started out largely as the hotel industry was very interested in some sort of relief because they were so hard hit. From there, it grew to include hospitality, but also in talking with legislators and the governor, there was a desire to help businesses more broadly, particularly those that were impacted directly by state mandates. So if your business was directed closed by state government mandate, or if there were substantial restrictions placed on your business operation by the state, then those entities are eligible for relief. So for example, when it was necessary to close dining rooms at restaurants, that's an example of a state mandate that impacted business. Or when it was necessary to, for example, ban out-of-state travel into the state. That's another example. Or health clubs that were closed entirely. So those sort of government directives that had a direct impact on operation of business are those really that we're targeting, but specifically within the hospitality, service, travel, recreation, and service industries. And I would direct people to arkansasready.com. That has a link to information, frequently asked questions, and lots of information about the grant. It helps clarify eligibility and what reimbursable expenses they can claim.
Terrific. We appreciate that clarification, and obviously that was part of the question. And I know that Ashley is also, our team's put up the Arkansas Ready information on the chat. So if you want to copy that and paste that accordingly, that would be useful. Just an additional question, and I tell you, I actually want to kind of make this the last because Ashley's let me know today that we just have a lot of folks who have submitted questions, and we'd love to really get to those from the audience sooner rather than later. So let me just ask this last question. Nonprofits, sole proprietors, franchises that have had the impact based on the criteria that you just mentioned would then be able to apply as well. Is that correct?
That is correct. And we also will use sales tax data, the change in sales tax data from 2019 to 2020, that will inform grant amounts. So that's also included in the formula that will, we have as Jim mentioned, roughly $48 million that we are able to grant out. And we anticipate that with the volume of requests that we will receive, the grant amounts will be prorated. And that formula includes information from sales tax data, the change from 2019 to 2020.
Is there some expectation as to what is the time period that this funding is hopeful to help these businesses sustain themselves?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
So if one's to apply, and I mean, obviously the objective here is to try to buoy these businesses up, these organizations up, keep them in business, supporting the state, obviously ultimately back to feeding our tax base, et cetera. But I mean, the fact is we could be 6 to maybe 12 months before we really start to see any real activity. And then I think Gretchen said we're probably at least a few years out as we really get folks ramped up and they get comfortable with traveling and eating and assembling in groups, right? So yeah. Is there a time period? Do we hope that this funding for a particular business might last them for 12 months or 6 months, or is that even projected?
It's really not. We, and Elizabeth Smith can talk to this better than I can, but the federal guidelines do not allow for revenue replacement. So what the formula that we have is that we can reimburse for expenses related to COVID mitigation that is outlined in the big rules. So people can submit requests for reimbursement on eligible expenses from the time period March 1st through September 30th. And that it's basically reimbursing for the expenses that they've had from the start of the pandemic to September 30th.
I understand. Secretary Smith, did you want to add to that at all? You're muted.
Sorry,
There you-
no, that's Stacy's covered it.
Okay, great. Well, let me stop there. Unless there's any other comments or recommendations or thoughts that any of you would like to add, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, who's got quite a few questions from the audience to pose to each and every one of you. So before we start with Ashley's questions, is there anything else that any of you would like to add? Jim, Secretary Smith or Hurst, Gretchen?
The one thing that I would add is I'm going to put in the chat box, I've just listed the website for the CARES Act Steering Committee, and that provides all the information that everything we've done. But also there's a link to this grant. There's a link for a grant related to rental assistance. So for people who have not been able to pay their rent, they can apply for this. They can make application and the money goes directly to the landlord. So that's helpful in the business industry as well for our landlords in Arkansas. Also, we've added a grant related to veterans needs and for nonprofit outreach. So you can see those on the website.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Ashley, let me turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Wayne. As Wayne mentioned, we do have several questions that have come in previously, so I want to respect those folks that sent those in a little bit earlier. So I've got about 10 questions to go through, and then we'll turn it over to our chat box. I'll go through there and we'll find questions in there. This first question that I got asked, will businesses who only have part-time employees be able to apply?
I will jump in. I don't see, Jim, do you want to touch on that? Make sure I don't misrepresent.
Sure. Absolutely. According to our program rules, the applicant must have at least one full-time employee. And we have borrowed a great deal from our friends at Economic Development Commission. We've utilized their definition of a full-time employee, which is 30 hours per week in terms of service to the applicant. And I'll note too that a sole proprietor, for example, the owner of a sole proprietorship, if he or she is the owner and the sole employee, they are eligible to apply under this program.
Perfect. Next question has already been answered, but I want to make sure whoever asked it gets this. Are gyms, fitness studios eligible to apply? Yes.
Yes.
Good deal.
Yes.
Okay, next question. How should a business decide if this support is deemed necessary for ongoing support? They go on to ask if they are able to get loans from banks still, would they be disqualified?
The answer I would give is that that's a judgment call of the business owner, whether this program is necessary for their ongoing and sustained operations in light of the COVID pandemic. We are intending to be one of many sources of assistance that the applicants can seek. For example, if an applicant has already received funding through the Paycheck Protection Program, which was also funded with CARES Act funding, whatever expenses were covered with that funding, that would have to be taken out of what the applicant seeks in this program. In other words, we're looking for a net amount that the applicant has not been able to secure from some other source when applying to this program.
And I'll add, so double dipping is not allowed. If you've already used federal money or some other state money to cover an expense, you can't ask for that same reimbursement. And also another factor, we are using, as I mentioned, sales tax to inform our decisions. So that could potentially, if a business does not have a substantial decrease in their sales tax, for example, it might be that their grant amount would be smaller. So, the other factor is their reimbursable request, the amount of expenses that they're asking to be reimbursed for.
Okay, thank you. This person asks to confirm any expense that was paid with PPP funds would be excluded as eligible. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Correct.
Okay. This one might have been asked already, but just going to do it anyway. Can you tell me if the hospitality grants are available for nonprofit organizations that provide shelter, meals, and other service organizations? Sorry, and other social services. That's what they said.
We're looking to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Secretary Hurst.
Well, Jim, you go ahead, and then I'll opine as well if I need to.
Per our program rules, we are looking for applicants that are primarily operating in, for example, the hospitality industry. So if that applicant, for example, is a nonprofit and its primary source of business operations and revenues are hospitality, such as food, drink, lodging, then it is a welcome applicant for the program. If those activities are incidental to what is a primary operation that's not covered under this program, then that applicant would not be eligible.
And I'll add that, and Leslie, why don't you speak to this about the social services angle?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Sometimes there's that delay. I was going to say, I think Secretary Smith may have more information on this as well, but I do know that there are CARES Act funds that are going to some of those organizations such as food banks and specific hunger relief organizations. I know part of that has been through, that has gone directly to DHS, that's going to be directed out. So I think those grant funds, I think maybe those are the appropriate funds that those organizations should be looking for and applying for.
And then I'll add one more note that per our program rules, government entities and quasi-government entities are excluded from this program. Some of those types of entities that you've mentioned are quasi-governmental or receive some kind of government assistance in their programming.
Let me just jump in there actually, because one of the questions that came through chat I think is relevant to this, which is one of the folks asked the question about they're a nonprofit, so they have no sales tax data, right? So how they have a limited amount from a small cafe that they have, but how will they be judged, or how will that be done? Can you maybe speak to that a little bit? And Corey,
Yep.
that's your question.
We got that covered too. Jim, do you want to review that?
Sure. Because our program is reaching into so many different areas of our various sectors that we're looking to serve, setting up the model, basically the computer model that would determine grant allocations, that was one of the challenges, Wayne. We wanted, as Secretary Hurst stated, to have sales tax collection and remittance be some type of indicator of economic impact and inform on grant decisions. But at the same time, we've got those entities out there who qualify as an applicant, but they are not required to collect and remit sales taxes. So that variable does not work well in the model that we've created. However, what we have done in our model is creates two separate applicant pools, those that collect and remit and those that do not. And the allocations to those that do not applicant pool would be put out on a pro rata basis.
Excellent. I hope, Corey, that is a good response to your question who asked that from our audience. So.
Yeah, that was helpful. I'm kind of wondering now if we fall, as a theater, if we fall into tourism or if we're more entertainment, would we qualify as a theater?
What
As a
theater is
yes.
it?
Theater squared.
Yes.
Good
Yes,
deal.
you're a nonprofit, correct?
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you.
Back to you, Ashley.
Okay, thanks. This one is specifically about the application. They were asking if they are able to see the exact questions yet, if there is a character or word count, and if there is a limit to the number or size of attachments.
All good questions. We are still working our way through the portal and its development. If you could repeat each of those one at a time. Let me respond one at a time, please.
Yep. So the first one says, what are the exact questions on the application?
We have got a working prototype. Basically, the first part of the portal, we're asking the applicant to identify itself, name of the company, tax ID number, location, contact name, telephone number, that sort of information. So page one is basically having the applicant identify who it is. The next page, page two, is a set of eligibility filters that are basic yes/no questions, and the applicant can determine from those questions based on our program rules whether it is qualified as an applicant under the program. And then three, we get to the actual part of the application itself, where certain information is entered, such as expenses that the applicant wishes to claim under this program, benefits and amounts the applicant has received from other sources, any kind of information that we may need regarding its activities in Arkansas, for example. So there's quite a few questions, but the application portal itself is set up with simplicity in mind.
Just to dovetail what Jim just said, Ashley, as he was providing that information on the chat, I think maybe it has just gone to you, but I gave a link to the PDF file that's a checklist for applicants. And our thought was on that, what Jim just went through is that is what the businesses should look at right now as to what information do I need to start pulling out and, take a picture of or scan it and have a PDF if you're going to need to upload it. And that document should help them really be prepared for when the application goes live.
Perfect. I'm putting that in the chat now.
Thank you, Leslie. And I'll add too that the portal is set up to where an applicant can begin the application process, save entries, log out, come back to it again if they need to gather more information, for example, while they're working their way through the application.
And finally, Ashley, let me add that we are working toward a webinar type presentation with our consultant. We're scheduling that, I believe, for the morning of November 13th. And on that presentation, we will have one of the consultants actually have the application on the screen and take the viewers actually through the application. So we have not got that invitation out to everyone, but be watching for that. Again, arkansasready.com will be a good source of information going forward.
Great. The next part of that question was, is there a word or character count?
Not currently. Most of the entries are yes/no type questions or select from a drop-down menu of options to answer questions. There will be some narrative in there, but that's a small portion of the application portal.
Okay. And then is there a limit on the number of sizes of attachments?
Not that I'm aware of yet. That's really more of an IT question of how much data is required for the attachment upload.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we're trying to keep it simple where one document will suffice as a source document to prove up a claimed expense.
Got it. Okay. And in that time I asked those few questions, we've had about 30 questions roll through the chat. So maybe we do like speed round. Let's try to answer as many as we can. Okay. Will Trice says, the expense eligibility period overlaps with the period covered by the majority of PPP loans/grants. Presumably we can't be double reimbursed. So on our application, do we submit every eligible expense and then notate what was covered by the PPP? Or do we only submit those expenses incurred outside of our respective PPP periods?
Great question.
Currently, as the portal is being developed, the approach is to have the applicant submit all prior receipts of other assistance in one portion of the application, but then in the claim part of the application, again, that's a net amount that we're asking for the applicant to input. Expenses for which no assistance has been received or expected to be received.
I just want to add, Will, we really miss the rep. We're glad you're here.
Okay, next question. It was mentioned there was another grant for veterans and rental assistance. Where can they find information on that?
The CARES Act website, it's within within Governor Hutchinson's website. If you click on the COVID updates, look down and there's a page for the CARES Act Steering Committee. And I posted the link on this chat so we can share that out too.
Perfect. Next question asks, if the owners of the hotel properties are located out of the state, will they still be eligible?
They
Yes.
will be eligible. They have to have a presence in Arkansas. They have to have 250 or less employees, and they actually have to employ Arkansans, and they have to spend whatever money they receive from the state of Arkansas in Arkansas. Jim, is there anything else to that?
You covered it nicely.
Perfect. Next question. Can nonprofits recoup lost donations from canceled fundraisers, etc., or is this considered revenue?
That's considered replacement of revenue.
I agree.
Okay, next one. The application seems to focus largely on reimbursement for eligible expenses, while I believe Director Hurst mentioned that some analysis would be made to the change between 2019 and 2020 sales tax receipts. Can someone speak to how awards will be weighted between expenses and revenue loss?
Yeah, let me see if I can articulate that better. For some reason, I have trouble stating it succinctly. There will be the amount of money that applicants can request reimbursement for, and those are eligible expenses that have happened between March 1st and September 30th. There is another metric where we will, DF&A will provide, the Department of Finance and Administration will provide sales tax data, the change from 2019 to 2020. So as Jim mentioned, that will indicate the impact that COVID-19 has had on their operation. And so those two factors will be merged. The sales tax data, the change in sales tax data will inform the grant amounts. So Jim, is there a better way to articulate that? I don't want to complicate it anymore. It is a bit of a complicated formula that includes reimbursable amounts and the change in sales tax data.
You've stated it as, I guess, simply as we can in a meeting like this. The model in the computer is a statistical model. We've used the assistance of statisticians to help us determine weighting factors for economic impact and making payment or disbursement decisions based on economic impact versus amounts claimed. I guess generally I can state an applicant may have significant expenses and significant economic impact and expect to get a greater grant amount than a peer who may be similarly situated, but not as adversely economically impacted. So in other words, another company that maybe have had a minor economic impact, but had similar expenses to claim would not receive as great of a disbursement under the program model.
Thank you. And let me just add, the reason we wanted to do that and the legislature agreed and approved it is that there, as we noted at first, there are some entities, even within the same sector, that have fared better than others. So there are some hotels in some areas that have done better than hotels in other areas. And so while we don't want to disqualify anyone, we do want the grant amounts to be informed by the impact to the business in terms of their economic viability. And so that's why we are using that sales tax data to inform the grant amounts.
Exactly. We're looking to get the aid to where it's needed most.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question on the grant program checklist, there's a reference to need for grant forms. What information should be included under that area?
Repeat that question, a need for?
They said there on the grant program checklist, there's a reference to a need for grant forms. And then what information should be included under that area?
The need for, I think that's a reference to the fact that the economic uncertainty if you don't have the grant. And that's a really an affirmation on the form that you're going to check, that your business needs this funding in order to help sustain them.
We've got a form in the packet, right, Leslie, that basically applicants have to affirm that they actually need the assistance. So
Yes.
that's the form. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. This next one comes with a little bit of a comment first. If we have received a PPP loan, but we have not yet applied for forgiveness, should we make our best guess about which expenses will be forgiven under PPP and then apply the others to this grant process? Or is the full amount of our PPP loan eligible expenses, whether forgiven or not, excluded from this business interruption grant? That was kind of a lot.
That question has come up quite a bit, and I would direct anyone that wants some guidance on that to U.S. Treasury FAQ number 59, which I think is on point.
Okay.
It's complicated. There are federal guidelines that dictate how this money can be used. And so I think Jim's advice is good.
Perfect.
Maybe
This
one more,
next-
actually.
Yes. For utility bills, same timeline. Is the same timeline March 1st to September 30th?
Yes.
Okay, maybe one more. That was quick.
That's good.
If your business started in October 2019, how does the comparison of sales tax data for 2019 during the March-September 2020 period work?
We will use what sales tax data is available and see if it's consistent with the industry in general, whichever industry that applicant may belong. If we only have limited data, then we will generally use the industry trend overall for that type of applicant.
Good deal.
Okay. There are a few more, but
Well, maybe we got about 4 minutes. So maybe 2 more minutes and then I'll wrap it up. How's that?
okay, let's see here. What sort of backup documentation will be required to demonstrate eligible expenses paid?
Very simply, in the case of a utility expense, a copy of the utility bill. If the applicant is a tenant and can produce a rent receipt that they've paid the landlord, that would be in evidence of their rent expense.
Okay, another question. Are the expenses eligible on a cash or accrual basis?
Great question. The program rule generally provides that the expense had to be incurred between March 1st and September 30th. So on an accrual basis, if it fairly fits within that time frame, it can be claimed.
Okay, will the organization request a certain amount or will it be based on a formula?
I'm sorry, a certain amount? I don't follow the question.
I would imagine they mean when they apply, do they specifically ask for a certain amount or will what they receive be based on a formula?
Oh, the applicant will submit its eligible expenses in the portal. We've got categories of eligible expenses, and the applicant will list dollar amount and then upload documents for each line item, evidencing and proving up their claimed expense. And that will go into the model to be calculated, and payment would be prorated based on economic impact and dollars claimed by the applicant pool.
Okay, we'll do one more and then close it up. Can the business interruption grant funds be used to pay mortgage expenses that were initially deferred?
Great question.
As far as a mortgage expense, if it's interest on the mortgage, yes. If it is a mortgage payment, no. We took the position that AEDC took, that payment of certain expenses would amount to capitalizing the business rather than covering expenses.
Jim, it would be correct, though, that even if their mortgage was deferred, they could still claim the interest on
That's right.
on that
Yes.
mortgage. Yeah.
Right.
Well, good
Okay.
enough. I think, Ashley, anything further?
That's it. Take it away.
Okay, good deal. Well, first of all, I think you all passed the test. That was quite a barrage of questions. And I think you've earned at least the rest of the day off, so we're thankful to each of you.
Awesome.
And look, this is obviously a topic, and one of the things that we'll do to it. I know Becky's on with us today, who is leads our brand and communications effort, and we'll make sure to stand up a web page that also supports all this information. We've got a pretty big megaphone at the Venture Center, so we'll try to get this information out as we move towards some of those later November dates. Make sure people understand this. God bless you all for what you do. This is such an important part of the livelihood of our state, and these businesses are critical to our future and our existence. I know one of the things that we tried to do was we bought a lot of gift cards. We have a lot of folks who come through the Venture Center to eat and so forth, and we did what we could to try to give these sort of little bridge loans to our businesses that support us so well. And so we're all trying to do our part here, but it's great that our government, our great leadership in the state, from ASA, the folks, obviously Secretary Smith and Secretary Hurst and Jim and Leslie and Gretchen, thank you for what you do and for being at really the edge of the knife here as we get through this pandemic. And we are going to get through it, and we are going to be fine. And it's just going to take some time. And with your leadership, we'll get there in good shape. So thanks so much. I want to just again say thanks also to our sponsors. Just to close this up today, again, Wright, Lindsay, and Jennings, Frost, the great folks. Carol, thanks for being with us here today from Simmons, Little Rock Chamber, and CFO Network. Everybody have a great weekend. Keep your chin up, stay positive. We're in a good place. We're going to get through this, and we'll be great. And everybody go wash your hands. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Good weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
All right.